What a fucking year, man. Honestly, it's breathtaking looking back at all the stuff that happened, all the music that came out this year, just everything really feels like it's been the biggest version of what it can be. And honestly, as a music enjoyer, I could not be happier. Now, if you follow my channel, you may or may not know that last year I promised a rundown of my top 100 albums of the year. And my lazy ass never fucking made it. So this year I went about things a little bit differently and I finally managed. So here is, Jesus Christ, my top 100 albums of 2024. Now, a majority of these albums I'm going to sort of feel just like they're solid.
It's alright,
I don't have a lot of opinions on all 100 of these projects. If I did, I would be insane. And I kind of am for making this and for listening to over 200 albums this year. But these were the ones that really stuck with me and that I felt deserved a place. So without further ado, here we go. Starting with number 100, Los Campesinos, All Hell. So I sort of felt like this was some standard alt-rock indie, but it was solid enough. I really didn't fall in love with the vocal performance, but I didn't feel like I needed to because this album more than made up for it with its lyrics. I really thought that they added this melancholic vibe to the whole thing. There was a little bit of an emo tinge to them, which I thought just made the whole thing really tied together and wonderful. And yeah, not much else to say. Just a solid project.
These are dark times, there is no denying.
So, with Vince Staples' Dark Times, I was listening to about half of it, and then all of a sudden I was like, damn, where the fuck did those chunky beats go? I was really vibing to those, chunky beats, the chunky. But that's okay, because what did stay was these emotional and really vulnerable and reflective lyrics, which I thought were written so well. They made the whole thing just feel super reflective, and I really love the way that Vince was able to put that together. I thought not only was it really strong, but it was captivating as a theme throughout the whole project. And I thought, that's a really hard thing to do. Good job, Vince.
This is my kingdom come.
St. Vincent Allborn Screaming was my second album from St. Vincent, and I love this rock direction that she took in this one. I don't know if that's a thing that she did in other ones or not, but whatever the case, I really liked this one. It was super diverse. I felt like the production really tied things together. I thought St. Vincent's vocal performance was pretty good. I thought the whole thing was well paced. It didn't really feel like it took too much time in any place. Honestly, yeah, I'm pretty happy with my Vinces this year.
Oh my god, I get it.
So, unfortunately, I have not gotten a chance to really go through some of the other Sadness projects, especially that one Pink one. And I found out it's actually because they kind of make 50 of them per year, which is kind of crazy, but whatever. I respect the grind or something. And I'm not really sure why this one was the one that I ended up checking out. I think it was just the one that was on the album of the year page when I looked that day. I love these simple black gaze structures. They're simple, but they're super effective and powerful, and it allows this album to be super emotionally investing. It takes this formula and it just really knows how to use it. And it made me want to check out some of the other projects to see how they all tackle that sound.
I say something. You like jazz?
Now listen, Afro Endlessness. Wow, this one was really just a great vibe. A lot of jazz and electronic elements that you wouldn't expect to blend very well together. But the way that these earthy electronics textures come together with these jazz instrumentation, they just seem to cooperate a lot more than one might think that they would. And it really just creates this unique vibe that was super nice to listen to. So I felt like putting it somewhere on this list because even though nothing really grabbed me, I just thought it was really solid and well done.
Graphic design is my passion.
So I checked out this Lip Critic Hex Dealer album mostly because of this ridiculous looking album cover, and I also think for all those freaky little garden fans out there, you should definitely check this out because even though it can be a little repetitive, especially with the trick that it sort of continuously pulls over and over again, it's got this really great sound and something that I really feel like it knows how to use well, even if it does tend to use it quite a bit.
I ate a man alive tonight.
Alright, first off, this thing is loud and heavy as hell, which was just awesome to hear. Often I feel like the loudness in a metalcore record can be a little artificial, but this feels real. It feels raw and it feels loud, and to me, that was pretty impressive. Unfortunately, I think with that, it feels like it's doing way too much at certain points, trying to be as loud and over the top as possible, and it doesn't always work. And I think that it just leads to a lot of ideas that, while interesting, could be more fully developed. But I did really have a good time with this thing, and I'm glad I checked it out.
Kowalski, analysis.
4 Years Strong, oh my god, I was so excited when this came out. Not only because 4 Years Strong has just recently become one of my new favorite bands. I just love their take on the easy core sound. I think they do it so well, and they have these crushing breakdowns. Just absolutely awesome stuff. And the only thing was, I was looking for a moment where they sort of did something new with it, and I'm so glad to say this was it. Now, I didn't love every single track on this one. Some stuff just didn't land, some stuff just fell flat, but the tracks that I did love have become some of my favorites of the year. They use that easy core sound, but they do something new and interesting with it that I haven't really seen before. Especially this track, Uncooked, which really, I think, embodies for me the way that 4 Years Strong is taking this formula and really changing things up. I love this band's ability to stay fresh and interesting, and I hope they continue to do some great work. So now I have to talk about this new Godspeed album. The way that they are able to capture feelings of despair and mourning and just tragedy and disaster, all in singular songs or even moments, is just masterful, and it shows a band that is truly at the top of their game. I just really would have liked them to do something more, especially with an album that clearly means a lot, not only to them, but the listener. That being said, I think its message is communicated quite well, not just through the title, but through the soundscapes that it presents. So I wouldn't have wanted to see this come out any other way.
Machine Girl.
And finally, for another band changing up its sound that I really enjoyed was Machine Girl with MG Ultra. Now, Machine Girl has, for a very long time, had this very loud and abrasive digital hardcore sound that I've enjoyed just a ton, and it was nice to see them switch things up. For a while, I wouldn't say they were necessarily stuck in that sound, but I felt like a trick that they continuously pulled. Luckily, I felt like Machine Girl really changed it up positively on this thing. Not only do all of these tracks feel new and interesting, but they present ideas that, even if they don't work, at least feel fully developed. It also feels like they never really had to compromise on that abrasive sound that, to me, makes Machine Girl so unique. It's just that it's been added to with this more melodic and hook-focused songwriting. It makes me really excited to see what Machine Girl does next. I was reluctant to check out Maggie Rocher's Don't Forget Me for a while because I had grown a little tired of singer-songwriter records, but luckily this one didn't seem to me to be too bad, and I actually ended up really liking it. I thought not only was the songwriting consistently great, but I just really liked the mixing, which is an odd thing to like about an album, but when you listen to a lot of singer-songwriter albums, the mixing and how the vocals compared to the instrumentals are handled becomes extremely important. And honestly, and on this album, it was just done really well. It's a great sounding album, and it suits Maggie's style really well. Yeah, just really enjoyed this one.
I bake cookies for your new little emo friends.
Wikipedia? What kind of fucking name is that? Anyway, I checked out this Wikipedia album, For the Rest of Your Life, and immediately I understood the paranormal comparisons that I was seeing. It's got this noisy, thick sound, it's very loud and a little overblown, but in a good way. But honestly, I felt there was enough separation that these felt like two different musical identities. I thought there was definitely way more of an emo twist to this sound, and I found the performances to be a real standout. Not that they are in paranormal records, but just that the sound is way more of a focus. Whereas with this, I just felt that the performances themselves were pretty good.
You ever been in a storm, Wally?
I've been meaning to check out High on Fire for a while, being the sludge metal fan that I am, having never heard this literally essential sludge metal band. And boy, was I not disappointed with this record. Cometh the Storm just has this grandiosity to it that I feel like would be pretty hard to replicate for any other band that hasn't just been in the scene for this long, doing what they do so well. It has this thick fog of a guitar tone that constantly feels like it's pulling the riffs down. Not to mention the vocals were absolutely fantastic as well. I really thought this was a strong offering from High on Fire, and I can't wait to check out what other stuff they have.
I gotta get out of here! Too late!
So, I was not aware that Beth Gibbons was a member of Portishead, but after hearing that, I really understood where this dark, earthy atmosphere came from. Clearly, that's where Portishead has left its mark on Beth. And I think it's really to her benefit because it creates this unique folk style that I felt really separated this out from the rest of the folk albums I listened to. It has this really subtle production style where things feel contained, like they could burst at any moment, and I think that that's a really hard thing to accomplish, but they managed to do it pretty well. This was the second of the 2 Smile albums that came out this year, and while I didn't love this one as much as the first one, I still felt like there was a lot that stood out here, especially in terms of the performances, which I felt were really allowed to shine on this record more than the first one. And I think a lot of that is really owed to the diversity of this record. The first Smile record really makes you feel like you're going on this journey. It feels very one note in a good way, and this one feels more of an experimentation. Ideas are being fully fleshed out here. And I really enjoyed hearing all of these ideas. It can be easy for a solo project like this to get out of hand with its pretentiousness and its experimentation, but I really feel like Thom Yorke knows what he's doing here.
I am Speed.
As a hardcore punk fan, I obviously couldn't miss out on most of the hardcore records that came out, so I tried to hit as many as possible, and one I hit that stood out to me was Speed's Only One Mode. This was one of the earlier records that I checked out this year, and what really stood out to me was these great riffs and this fun atmosphere that I really thought made it stand out from some of the other straightforward hardcore that you sometimes get. And the other thing I enjoyed was this constant changing of speed. This album had this ferocious yet somewhat even playful approach to hardcore that I felt was just done in a really solid way.
What happened, guys?
So, I remembered Aurora from that one song that came out. I can't remember how many years ago it was, but my sister was really into it because of that WOOF movie that was being made at the time. And I was really pleasantly surprised to see that this is a fully fleshed out sound over here. Aurora really knows how to use her voice. She's got such an identifiable falsetto, and it really adds to this overall icy sound that reminded me a little bit of Björk's Vespertine in the way that it creates that certain coldness, but that certain artfulness, and like sitting by a warm fire while your house gets snowed out, that kind of thing. I've been really into a lot of tracks from this album, which has been great. I'm excited to see what Aurora does next.
Chaos is back!
So, my biggest problem with this Big Brave record that came out was that the first half is so strong, and then the second half just unfortunately loses me. It's got this really unique, heavy sound that I feel like not many other bands have been able to replicate in as interesting a way as Big Brave here. But as it goes on, it kind of loses its novelty a little bit. But that first half is super strong. Some of the most memorable moments that I've heard this year have come from this album. So I definitely recommend checking it out if you're at all a doom metal or a drone metal fan.
Bleeding me dry like a goddamn vampire.
Apparently, the stuff that I checked out by Vampire Weekend was from the album that everybody seems to not like. I was not aware of this. I just was vibing to Harmony Hall, man. I don't even know what was going on. Well, Vampire Weekend was really willing to push the boundaries, especially with their production choices, and it created this quirky feel that just really brightened up this release. There's a lot of moments where I feel like without these production choices, some of the songs would even fall flat, but because of the way that these songs are presented to me, they feel way more interesting and unique and in-depth. I checked out My Light, My Destroyer by Cassandra Jenkins, who I'd never heard of. A lot of these artists I've never heard of. I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't know these people. And yet, I'm continuously blown away by the new voices that I allow into my head. This had some fantastic production. Just this really dark sound that overall I found really nice to listen to. It had these great builds, these peaks and valleys, guided really carefully by this soft lead vocal performance that I thought was just really strong and tied the whole thing together. Great record.
All right, I'll just get to the pitch.
Yet another folk album that I checked out. I checked out Jessica Pratt's Here in the Pitch, which had this really tender and cute sound with a really sweet vocal performance that just made this whole thing really enjoyable to listen to. Another quality about this album I found to be really strong was its timelessness. It feels like this could have come out at any point in time. And I think that's a really unique quality for an album to have, especially a folk album. Yeah. Just enjoyed this one.
Real name and age are still unknown to the public.
So, I never really heard of this Mach-Hommy figure. Apparently, he's been an up-and-coming in the rap scene, well known for his sort of mysterious identity, which is pretty cool. I thought that the beats here specifically were really solid, and it gave this great vibe throughout the whole thing. Nothing feels too bare or underdeveloped. Every idea just feels fully explored. And in a rap album, that's something that's personally really important to me. Alright, now we just gotta get like the Scooby-Doo guys on this Mach-Hommy individual over here.
Home field with advantage.
You got third.
I've been a Bright Eyes fan for a while now, and while nothing really sticks out to me as much as the prime era of Bright Eyes, I can't help but still continue to admire this blending of folk and pop and emo songwriting. It's just such an iconic sound to me, and it's something that I can always slip into. And I thought this was just a great continuation of that sound. It was an upbeat vibe that I think Bright Eyes does really well. And while we're not getting these hyper unique lyrical moments like on previous Bright Eyes albums, I really don't think we needed more of that. I've gotten my fair share of emotion from Bright Eyes albums, and I really wasn't looking for much beyond a nice, pleasant folk album here, and that's exactly what it was. Checking out this Warp Stormer album was interesting. I feel like this thing just got better as it went on. It's a really fun blend of doom and thrash, which is something I don't actually see too often, especially not anymore. And I feel like each song really had its distinct pacing and sound, but what tied it all together was this great sense of grandiosity, this epicness, if you will. Just a really, really solid metal album.
Why are you blue?
Now, I am a pop-punk fan, but one band in particular has been sort of unimpressive to me in the past, and that band is Real Friends. Now, I know they're pretty popular within the modern pop-punk emo scene right now, but none of their stuff has really stuck out to me, but as Blue Hour came out and I listened to some of the singles, I was really pleasantly surprised with what Real Friends was able to put together here. It's just a great collection of tracks with some familiar sounds, but they're all well performed. And I feel like that's what Real Friends can really succeed at sometimes, is taking a sound that we are all pretty familiar with, and while not necessarily doing something unique with it, just putting it together in a really engaging and fun way. And then when it comes to pop punk, 20 years after its major popularity, that's all you really have to ask for.
We found our lucky frog.
D-I-I-V div dive. Look, it's shoegaze. Shoegaze is kind of in a really good place right now, and this was just another example of that. Just a really pleasant listen with a soothing vocal performance. I guess my only problem is that everything does blend together a little bit for me, as can happen with a lot of shoegaze albums, where it just sort of puts you in a state where you're just kind of sitting there listening to guitar sounds. But I actually didn't mind it this time. I thought the atmosphere was well done enough to keep me engaged throughout the whole thing, and I really didn't feel like it needed to change it up that often. Horrors has become one of my favorite bands. Their take on noise rock blended with sludge metal and post-hardcore is just one of the most exciting takes on that kind of sound to me. And their projects are super streamlined with some great songwriting and amazing guitar tones. But because this band really only got started within the last decade, I was really hoping that they would continue that sound in as an engaging way. And I thought this did a solid enough job. It's really all I could have asked for. There's a lot of highlights that stick out to me as hitting the highs of the last album. The great tone and vocals are still there. The songwriting is still there. I think the thing is just that not as many songs grabbed me as much as every song on Gold pretty much did. But that's okay. I'm still glad that this was a great follow-up, and I'm excited to hear what this band does next.
Let's give a huge thanks to Rick Sanchez for booking Logic!
So my only perception of Logic is really through reactions, mainly by Fantano, the weird relationship they seem to have, and that one part where he goes on Rick and Morty. And also that one part where Brian Griffin sings on one of his songs.
Peter, what are you doing? What the fuck?
So this is really my first Logic project, and to be honest, I think I caught him at the top of his game here. As far as I know, this is one of his best projects to date. It's super enjoyable, with some fun interludes and a fun concept to boot, and just a lot of songs that really surprised me with how much they engaged me and excited me. I'm surprised to see myself come back to some of the singles on this thing, actually. But look, I'm glad that an artist like this with a so-so track record can still make something this enjoyable.
Any big plans for the weekend, that Bill? Gotta take the kids to soccer.
Obviously, being one of those, gays, I had heard of Soccer Mommy before, but I wasn't really sure what it is. It sounded like one of those Midwest emo bands. Apparently it's not. It's just like indie rock. And I have mixed feelings about indie rock. I think that in the modern day, it can be a little boring. And Soccer Mommy comes sort of close to falling into that trap, but every time it seems to avoid it. I don't know what it is. I think it has to be the songwriting, because these songs, despite not really being my thing, are still super engaging. And they have these subtle dynamics that elevate this quieter indie rock sound that I think overall this is just someone knowing how to do their job. And I don't know. That's all I really needed from this thing.
Metals can be melted by the heat of revenge.
Then I also checked out Kriegstog, I'm so sorry, Love and Revenge. And this thing was super energetic, just fun and loud the whole time. Felt like just absolutely banging, you know? And a great center vocal performance. Honestly, this was just a really solid time. It's number 71. I don't know what else you want me to say. Go check this out. It's fun.
Who the heck are you?
I'm Envy.
I heard a lot of talk about this album, Maze Envy by Severus, and when I checked it out, I was not disappointed. This thing has a gigantic, towering sound, but most importantly has these moments to breathe, balanced with that crushing brutality that comes over and over again. A lot of these sections flow super well, which I find interesting. I think in a lot of progressive metal albums, sometimes you can get whiplash. Really, I thought that was not a problem at all in this album. Really happy with metal this year.
Every known kind of berry into one flavour of jelly.
Okay, so apparently Soft Play is just two British blokes. These guys have a super unique sound, especially in their percussion or their drumming, whatever you want to call it, because when I went to go see what this guy was actually playing, his drum set looked like this. And I thought, okay, what the fuck? But despite having such minimal instrumentation, they really have crafted this unique and full sound despite all the limitations that just being two people presents, which I think is pretty challenging. Even with bands like Royal Blood or 21 Pilots, sometimes things can feel like they're missing just a little bit, but I never get that sense with Soft Play. I think what also helps is this unique percussive style really adds to the songwriting and just makes things that much more engaging. It's a really unique approach to loud rock, and I'm definitely willing to check out what other stuff this group has done.
You're heavy.
Another band that I had heard a lot about was Full of Hell, and again, like High on Fire, while I'm eager to check out all of their other stuff, I did happen to start with their 2024 release, and I was just kind of blown away. This thing plays around with numerous sounds, creating a ton of memorable moments. There's grindcore, there's sludge metal, there's post-hardcore, there's death metal, there's even some post-metal in there, but none of these sounds feel surface level because they're all blended together so carefully. It feels like they're movements in pieces of metal, which sounds so pretentious, but I promise it makes sense if you listen to the thing. This thing transitions between these sounds so effortlessly, and you can really tell that these are people that have just absolutely mastered their sound.
I don't care that you broke your elbow.
At number 67, we have Elbow's Audio Vertigo. So I never heard of Elbow, but apparently this was a little bit of a comeback record, or at the very least, a very late release that was just getting a lot of attention. And you can tell that this is a band with a lot of history. Their chemistry between all of the members flows super well. There's a super strong, identifiable aesthetic to this album. And, of course, there's a few dull moments, but overall this thing has some of my favorite songs from this year that I've been coming back to again and again. Just excellent work all around on this thing.
Well, it was a whole dream. Bye!
So then I headed over to one of Fantano's favorite bands to absolutely meet Ride, the Lemon Twigs, with their album A Dream Is All We Know. Now, I just made fun of Lemon Twigs, but actually they kind of serve on this thing. Like their last album, this is just such a pleasant and fun take on that classic Beatles and Beach Boys style melody and songwriting. And yet, it doesn't ever really feel like an homage as much as it feels like a progression of the style. It's got these fantastic harmonies and great songwriting, but just the overall presentation is so fun and delightful and just a pleasure to listen to.
Barf, 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 woof, woof, woof.
Next, one of the most interesting bands that I've heard of, Fat Dog with their album WOOF. This thing is really fucking weird, but it's a super fun listen. There's amazing performances, especially in the vocals. It really feels lively and authentic, like you never really know what they're gonna do. And I can't emphasize enough how much the vocal performance helps with that. There are so many moments where just that performance alone is able to drive a new understanding for me of what the song is trying to convey sonically, and that's super impressive. But this thing just blends so many different styles together so well. Definitely a band I'm looking out for if they ever go on tour again.
Lock arms around her and go, nightmare, 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 nightmare.
Alright, well, this was also a nice surprise. They chisel with What a Fucking Nightmare. One of the few Oi bands that I've checked out, pretty much the only one that I've checked out, actually. As much as this sound is known for its interesting political history, the Chisel here are coming in being absolutely based and just delivering one of the most raw punk performances you'll hear this year. There is a perfect vocal performance here, a raw, untamed energy, just a laser-focused punk record.
Shaolin Shadowboxing.
A lot of these albums are from artists I've never heard of. Following new music this closely has been something that I have really only started within the last 2 years or so. That being said, MAVI might be one of my favorites from this year. Just all around, everything that goes into making a really good rap album is here. There's these great beats and production style, an emotional performance, amazing lyrics. Everything I could really want is just done really well. But while it might not be as ambitious as a To Pimp a Butterfly or anything like that, I don't really think it needs to be. It's just really, really well done, and something that I found myself coming back to.
Ongo Goblogian, the art collector.
Perennial, with their album Our History, created a sound that I found super fun and engaging. These riffs are intelligent and creative. The energy is consistent the whole time. It's just such a fun listen. I think my only problem is that it's a bit short when it comes to each song. I felt like each song on its own could have done just a little bit more if it had been pushed just a little further. But hey, I can't complain. This is just a great album.
And I always come to work with a smile.
I was surprised to see Brad Taste give this a 100. I don't really know what's going on with him, but he seems to enjoy some Porter Robinson. And when I checked it out, I was expected to be annoyed by this style, but it really grew on me the more I listened to it. It's so charming and playful, making this thing a super fun listen, and it's got these emotional lyrics, great songwriting and storytelling that feel honest and feel authentic, which I think is so vital to this bedroom pop influenced sound. Just a really fun, cute album.
Of the handsome Prince Charming.
The name of this album says it all. Clairo's charm is... It's charming. It's got a ton of fun hooks, a great central vocal performance, really great performances all around, and just this nice, quiet, laid-back vibe that is super fun to put on at any time and just listen to. It feels the same as like watching your comfort show or sitting by the fire. It's just so warm and peaceful. I think Clairo did an excellent job creating this atmosphere. It feels extremely intentional and super well done.
I don't know. Do something with turquoise.
One artist last year that I saw got a lot of buzz was TURQUOISEDEATH. And I'd never really gotten into the world of drum and bass or breakcore or anything like that. Obviously, I had seen all the penis music memes and stuff over the last year or so. I think I've really started to see the appeal of this genre, and I think TURQUOISEDEATH is one of the leading examples of how interesting this genre can be. Not only is the production amazing, but for a genre that's so focused on loops and samples, none of this feels very repetitive. It feels glittering and exciting and magical and glowing in a lot of ways that I feel like the surface level breakcore doesn't exactly show. Just a great project from TURQUOISEDEATH overall.
Why are you so fucking negative all the time?
So, Poppy's career has been super interesting because it's kind of answered the question that I've always sort of wondered, which is, what if a pop artist suddenly stopped making pop and then just made metal? And it seems like this is the closest we're getting. And honestly, if that's the case, then that's fine, because Poppy's career has, I think, been a pleasant surprise for pretty much anyone that's followed it. For a while now, Poppy has been a pretty much essential voice in the modern alternative or pop metal scene, if you will. And I've been super happy to see her take her place there, especially given the context behind her career, which I'm not going to get into because Oh my god. Anyway, what was interesting to me about this album? Well, to me, it really cemented Poppy as an excellent metal vocalist. I think a lot of times it can be easy to just kind of learn how to scream and then just kind of go from there. But Poppy's throwing in squeals and growls and all kinds of different screams that show me that she's really putting in the effort to this sound. There's great riffs, excellent production, the occasional Bring Me the Horizon ripoff, but I feel like Poppy, like other bands, have taken that sound and just kind of run with it. So I don't really see it as a ripoff as much as I see it as that's the style that is being done now, and Poppy's doing it really well.
He's already dead!
So I think with Kendrick, we kind of have to address the elephant in the room here. Damn really just is not his best. I know that a lot of people enjoy it, but considering the other output, I really can't call Damn anything above a 7 out of 10. Anyway, GNX. So this is a surprise release from Kendrick, and I think given that it was a surprise release that clearly was worked on within the last year or so, I think it's fair for this album to occupy a space as just Kendrick doing whatever he wanted, basically celebrating the victory that he very, very much earned this year. It's got great hooks, fantastic performances from Kendrick, and I love that it features a bunch of just kind of random West Coast rappers that Kendrick just seems to get along with or whatever. Really, this feels like a celebration of the West Coast, bringing back that G-Funk sound, which I think Kendrick does super well. It's clear that this is a scene that means a lot to him. Overall, this thing is just a super fun time. I've been coming back a lot to a lot of these singles.
I am untethered and my rage knows no bounds!
Well, after 26,000 years, we finally got our fourth Nails album, Every Bridge Burning. This is easily one of my favorite bands in the grindcore realm, and nobody really does it as brutally and as loud and as angry as they do. And sure, while their best album, in my opinion, is very easily their first, I think it's pretty easy to say that every album since has been a worthy enough follow-up to that classic. It's got great production, great moments, hard-hitting riffs, just everything I would have wanted from this thing.
There's not much food in this chroma nightmare that we call society.
By this point, I think it's fair to call Tyler one of the big three. I mean, the hype that this guy generated with this album, the aesthetics that he's been able to create with each release, the music style that is so identifiably him, and I think that that has all been just perfectly exemplified by Chromacopia. While I don't think it's his best, because I am, of course, an Igor shill, this thing has a ton to offer. Fans really got served a whole meal with this one, and I'm so glad. You can feel the effort that Tyler put into this release. It's got fantastic emotional moments, creative beats and production choices, a really great flow between tracks, and again, an aesthetic that just feels impenetrable. You can really see that Tyler has evolved beyond just the music, and this whole thing is really just an art form. Definitely one of the strongest rap releases this year.
Turn off the fucking shoo-shoo, you're scaring the hose.
I think, if anything, what I can respect about Shoo is how often they are willing to change their sound. Shoo may have identifiably weird aspects to them, but I wouldn't say that it's easy to define them by any one concept or sound or even general vibe. But if you're looking to get into the band, I can't recommend this album enough. Their new album with a title that's really long because these guys are really weird is easily one of their most mainstream and accessible releases. Now, that's not to downplay anything on it. In fact, I actually think this plays to the album's benefit. My only problem with Shoo is that I can't really just casually play them. Even for me, their music is so abstract and so focused on mood and sonic experimentation that I really have to be in a very specific mindset and place to listen to it. But a lot of these songs I can easily see putting on some of my playlists. They've got fun riffs. Jamie's vocals are, of course, one of the best things about the whole project. And of course, that mastery of sound that Shoo has developed. I also want to say that me and my roommate went to a Shoo concert and we had an absolute blast. These guys are just amazing at what they do. And at one point their drummer broke a stick in the middle of the show and the thing went flying at me and I caught it and I got it signed, which I've been telling everybody about because it's like one of the coolest things that happened to me. Anyway, next album.
Reading Rainbow.
Easily the most fascinating thing to me about Your Arms Are My Cocoon's Death of a Rabbit is its production style. This thing doesn't sound like anything I've ever heard before. Midwest emo is known for its lo-fi, very minimal, very rough production style, but this thing pushes that to the absolute limits. This thing sounds like an Xbox headset. But what it allows for is this crazy specific intimate feeling that gets hinted at by other Midwest emo albums and done very well by quite a few of them, but not really in the same way that this album is doing it. My only problem is that not every idea feels fully developed. But that being said, the creativity in this production style is enough for me to say that this is an excellent album that's definitely worth your time, especially if you're a fan of the Midwest emo sound.
Can you sum it up in a word? No. A sound?
One of my friends on Discord recommended me this metal album, Pyron's Exhaust, and this thing is just an absolute bonkers take on metal. I haven't really gotten that much into avant-garde metal. I just don't know enough of it, but this thing pretty much sold me. It's constantly throwing you in different directions, but it's got these straightforward tracks that feel super intense and really tie the whole thing together, so it doesn't feel like the entire time you're just being thrown around randomly. Everything feels precise and calculated, and yet at the same time so chaotic and impossible to predict. And if that's a good representation of what the world of avant-garde metal has to offer, then man, I am all in. Next, obviously, there was a ton of buzz around Fontaines D.C.'s Romance. And when I checked it out, I was met with a great fusion of a ton of different styles, from art rock to indie rock to power pop to pop rock. I just fell in love with the style of this album. The way it utilizes orchestra elements to emphasize the romance of this album is just so pleasant to listen to. Not to mention a great vocal performance as well.
I like beer because it is good. I drink beer because I should.
In the realm of country, I have been really happy to see Bryan as a voice gain so much popularity. I wasn't really there for the uprising, but I did sort of hop on the bandwagon last year when the self-titled came out, and I thought it was good. I thought it was solid. It wasn't really anything that stuck out to me. The only thing that I paid attention to was the fact that it actually felt like authentic country, and I was really happy to see that in a world where I feel like a lot of the modern country scene is just kind of meh. Bryan stands out as someone genuinely trying to bring the art back into the genre. And I'm so happy to say that that applies fully to Zach's latest release, The Great American Bar Scene. The artistry starts like right at the beginning with this amazing poem that really just summarizes the entire theme of the album, and that theme continues throughout the whole project. It felt super Springsteen influenced, which was great because he's also on the album. Speaking of which, this thing has an insane feature list. And overall, I just felt like it was an elevated version of Zach's distinct country style of just being super approachable and somber and inviting. I feel like not a second is wasted here. And while not every track grabs me as much as others do, I can easily say that this is definitely my favorite country album of the year.
Asuka, go get him.
Something you might have seen come up in recent years is a sound referred to as Daria-core. Now, it's called this because of a series of albums called Daria-core created by, I think, Jane Remover, and it spawned a few other artists that I've really actually come to enjoy. Not only the Daria-core stuff itself, but also these artists that come out of this new scene. And one of those that me and one of my roommates really fell in love with was Asukagender and their new album, Asukacore 2. I like the best part of Daria-core. This thing is just so stupid, but so infectious and fun to listen to. Me and my roommate were just vibing at the insane sampled choices that you get when you get to Daria-core. I think Daria-core, and especially this album, is at its best when it feels like it can literally only exist at this moment in time. It is the opposite of timeless. And I think that's what's so good about it, is that it just feels so contained to itself while also being genuinely enjoyable beyond just hearing some meme song over a loud distorted bass drop or whatever. The other thing that I really enjoyed about this is that I don't feel like it replicates the Daria-core style, but instead puts its own spin on it, which I really enjoyed. Absolutely loving this project. Next up was this noise rock / post-hardcore album that I checked out, Missouri Executive Order 44's Salt Sermon. And when I say this thing is absolutely crushing, I do mean it. This thing is bonkers at times. But it's got these great dynamics that I think are underappreciated in the realm of noisy post-hardcore sludge metal hybrids. And it creates this great overall presentation that really just makes it an excellent project to go through. It throws you in a ton of different directions, but all of it feels confined to this sound in such a strong and streamlined way. Not to mention this violent gothic lyrical style that I think really gives the album another unique spin. This thing is just awesome, and if you're into that loud, noisy rock style, definitely check this out.
I love the dark, I love slippery things, I love being naked in the sewer.
Next was another noisy album I checked out, The Body, with their album The Crying Out of Things. And yet another project I've been meaning to really dive into. The Body presents here so many great moments of noise, and at any given moment you never feel like they've run out of tricks to pull. They're always surprising you with something new. The other thing I really liked was this controversial style of screaming. I saw a lot of people really didn't like it, but I actually thought that it was a super unique approach to noise rock vocals. I haven't really ever heard anything like it, and honestly, I thought that was for the best. It's just a super abrasive sound. I can't even really describe it. It's just a wailing, horrid, awful noise, but it works so well with the Body's sound that they've created here. Definitely check this out.
You on drugs?
For a while, I have loved the specific sound that Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats has, and at first, I was a little disappointed to see them change it up so much on their new album, Nil Aura Blue. This thing is a completely different vibe, but as I re-listened, it became more and more prevalent that they were going for something grander and more ambitious than anything they had done previously. And personally, it's a really nice addition to what was kind of becoming a little bit of a stale gimmick of taking a stoner rock sound and with distorted vocals and sludgy riffs. And while there's some of that, and it's pretty good on here, I can't help but just appreciate the sonic landscape that this thing creates. A sound that fits Uncle Acid's vibe perfectly. Honestly, I'm just really glad that the band is experimenting and trying something new, and that it's going well for them.
What you're looking at is a clam.
I don't have a lot to say about this Clamor album. Really, I just thought it was just some great post-hardcore and emo songwriting. I love the guitar tones, the vocals are super tender and fun. Really, there's not much here that I can say. Just a great listen.
All the noise.
One of the most interesting projects I checked out was DJ ReVert's ReVertPunk, also known as DJ Recode, who has created this sound that I don't even really know how to describe. It pulls from so many different places and never really sticks to one idea, even in each individual song. This thing just goes every possible place it can with so many different vibes, so many different sounds, and all of it just feels so noisy and chaotic and unpredictable. Just great all around.
It's snowing! We're gonna die!
Another super noisy album was this Centuries Snow as a Metaphor for Death project. Again, just something really, really noisy, but really pays attention to the dynamics. Not to mention it has a fantastic final track that really, really tied this project together for me. Definitely one of the stronger offerings in the hardcore punk realm this year.
Nerd.
At number 42, we have this Iechyd the Nerd album, What You Want. Now, this is an emo release that has so many memorable moments. It is just back-to-back fun performances that hit all of the highs that the emo genre has to offer. Similar to Real Friends, while this doesn't necessarily offer anything new, it is a take on the genre that clearly has so much love for the influences that it takes from that I honestly just can't help but love it. The presentation here is just top-notch.
You think you know me.
Of course, I was going to have this new JPEGMAFIA on here, which is surprising because I've actually had some slightly mixed feelings on JPEG. I feel like there's something that I'm not really getting that I'm supposed to get about JPEG. Don't get me wrong, I like all of his music, but for me, there just always seems to be that extra oomph missing from it. That being said, JPEG totally blew me away with this. That oomph is all there. JPEG totally has the sauce on this record. And no, it's not just because of this rock-focused production, although that does help. He's definitely flirted with these rock sounds in the past, even doing full songs that really utilize these rock samples. Never have I felt like he's gone as far with it as he can, as with this new album. It allows it to be easily his most dynamic and exciting project for me to date.
This is dark. Darkest thing we've ever done.
At number 40, we have Couch Sluts, You Could Do It Tonight. So overall, this is a really solid sludge metal album with a really stellar vocal performance. Character that is portrayed in these songs is so distinct and so clear and so well performed. Easily one of the most memorable vocal performances I've heard this year. I think that also is owed to the subject matter, which, while being very dark, is interesting and complex and feels like you're listening to pure horror stories. Easily one of the most distinct lyrical styles I've heard in really a sludge metal album in a very long time. The subject matter is extremely dark, but it not only feels surreal and in that sense captivating, but it feels like it tackles darker real-world issues in these surreal and dark and horrifying ways. Just a great album from Couch Slut over here.
Won't you shake a poor sinner's hand?
I'm not the biggest fan of post-rock. I like Godspeed, Swans, but overall I feel like sometimes it can just be a little bit empty or a little bit pretentious, and that is not the case with A Lonely Sinner by Sam Lyric. Most importantly, this album does not feel like it wastes your time. I feel like a lot of post-rock albums, even the best ones, can feel like they go on a little bit longer than they need to. Sometimes a lot longer than they need to. But this is a really well-paced album. The other thing that stands out is the excellent production. As far as I know, this is one person doing all of this, but they absolutely knocked it out of the park with the sound of this album. It is absolutely spectacular. It's got these great builds, these great instrumentations, just amazing stuff.
It's called Glass Beach.
Glass Beach's Plastic Death actually occupied my number one spot for a while, but after re-listening, it just didn't hit me as much. I still really like it. It's a huge change from their original sound, which I liked in some ways and didn't like in others. In some ways I did like it because I felt that while the original sound was interesting, they had pretty much said everything they wanted to say with it on that first album. On the other hand, I do think that sound had a lot to offer, and I didn't feel like that first album expressed every idea as well as it could have. But the songwriting really shines here, and I think that is one of Glass Beach's strongest attributes. Not only that, but the performances are excellent. The vocals are great. This is pretty much everything I would have wanted in continuation of those elements from the original Glass Beach album, even if it isn't delivered in the same exact way.
Samurai promo.
Probably one of my favorite rap albums from this year was Lupe Fiasco's Samurai. It's got a great charismatic lead performance, this great diversity in beats, which is super important to me for a rap album, and a lot of fun melodic moments to boot. Just the vibe of this thing is so strong and so clear from the beginning. I feel like I can just put this on whenever and I'll have a great time. I feel like that's such an essential characteristic of a great rap album, when its atmosphere is able to pull you in at any moment. And this is a perfect example.
With a box of scraps!
Right next to it, we have another album that I feel like accomplished something very similar, and that is Quadeca's Scrapyard. So I know that the Scrapyard mixtapes are supposed to be leftover tracks and just stuff that Quadeca is working on or whatever, but these do really feel like fully fleshed out ideas. These don't just feel like FL Studio loops tucked away in some folder in Finder. There's great flows here, catchy hooks, great instrumentals, and a really nice spacey vibe that occupies the whole thing. This is just another album that I feel like I vibe to whenever I put it on.
Hi, Mr. Flag.
So this year I got really into Primus, and I think it's because no other band really has their sound. They have crafted easily one of the most unique sounds in alternative rock and alternative metal. Basically, you know a Primus song when you hear one, which unfortunately also means that you hear when something is influenced by Primus. But I think this is one of the best bands to really wear their influences directly on their sleeve. Flagman, with their album Tastes Incredible, is combining Primus, System of a Down, and even a little Nine Inch Nails in a great blend of late 90s and early 2000s alternative styles that just absolutely blew me out of the water with how much it can do with a combination of influences that could come off as super tacky. Of course, with this being Primus influence, the bass lines are absolutely fantastic. The performances in general are stellar, but most of all, What Primus and System of a Down share in common is their creative and often absurd approach to alternative rock and metal. And that character is not lost whatsoever when it comes to Flagman. These are people with an excellent sense of humor, and that absolutely goes into their music. The performances are so fun and charismatic. Absolutely loving this.
Gotta hit him with this furry shit.
Violet Pony's Monarch of Monsters is long. Maybe doesn't even need to be that long, but surprisingly it really uses its time well. It's got a great vocal performance, it's super vibrant and expressive, and interestingly the lyrics are super cryptic. And in that, I feel like there's a lot of intrigue that this album creates, not just with its sound but with its presentation. It really feels like one of those albums that if I were to listen to it again, I would get a completely different experience out of it than the first time, and I really enjoy a project that works like that. It's a blending of a lot of different styles too, which I think adds to that general atmosphere of depth. Just some great stuff.
I don't care whose fault it is.
Another album in the emo, screamo, post-hardcore realm was State Faults with their album Children of the Moon. These guys have a surprisingly groovy approach to the sound, which I found really interesting. Genuinely, some of these tracks I feel like I could actually dance to, which is kind of crazy for a screamo album. It's got these great post-hardcore vocals, and while it's a little long, I do feel like the pacing for most of it is really strong. Just a great unique sound and a lot to offer for anyone who really wants to get into it.
Christian God is real. He's been asleep for thousands of years. We're gonna sneak up there and kill him.
Metal was really shining this year, and another great example of that was Ulcerate's Cutting the Throat of God. This thing has an absolutely massive sound. Just absolutely brutal and crushing, everything that I love metal to be. Also, the performances are seriously a standout. Some excellent guitar work and drumming on this album. Great vocals as well. Everything is just really top-notch when it comes to the performances. For me, the only problem is that the songs go on just a little longer than I feel that they need to. But overall, when the performances are this good and the sound is this good, I really don't mind as much.
Write that down.
One genre that has really picked up traction in the 2020s has easily been post-punk. Now, as far as I know, Sprints is not one of the bigger bands in that scene up and coming right now, but I thought that their album this year, Letter to Self, had a lot to offer to that scene in general. Just like any great post-punk album, the angularity and the energy is all there. It's got a great charismatic lead vocal performance and some really fun riffs and songwriting. Just really fun.
Green is not a creative color.
At number 30, it is going to be probably the biggest album of the year with Charlie XCX, Pratt. This thing took the world by storm. I cannot stress this enough. You could not escape Pratt Summer. And I think that is fully owed to this album's presentation. The rollout for this thing was legendary. Seeing this album cover come out, all of the stuff that happened before its release, all the memes, all of the mystery and excitement behind it, all of that just came together to make an exciting album release. That was one of my favorite moments from the music community in general this year. So, how was the actual album? Now, hear me out. A lot of this album, to me, is the response and the success that it gained. And I feel like what it's going to do for pop in the future. To me, the appeal of this album is what it represents in terms of our cultural response to it and its historical importance as an album that came out this year. Basically, what I'm saying is I think this is going to be a classic album. I think this is going to be one of those albums that 50 years we look back on and we still remember its importance. So while I don't love every single track, it's really for that reason that I'm placing it so high, which to many people would seem weird, but really I think that is the true power of this album. Not to say that the thing is bad. I mean, I can't really place it at 30 without thinking it's good. Overall, I think its strongest elements are its hooks and absolutely its production. I also love its lyrical themes. I find in a world where being a celebrity feels like such a distant concept, artists like Chapel Roan and Charlie XCX really feeling like more down-to-earth, especially Chapel, is super important, and I loved seeing these themes of not feeling like you are good enough, or not knowing how to respond in social situations, or trying to understand one's place in the world. The authenticity feels absolutely there, and it's made for some super memorable songs for me. Next, we're talking about Echo Astral's Pink Balloons. This was another post-hardcore / garage rock album that I checked out that I absolutely loved the sound of. This thing is loud and unfiltered, and it's just got a great overall sound and vibe. It feels so big in scale despite being kind of short in length, which I think is a really hard thing to accomplish. This thing offers everything it can in the short amount of time it's around. Not to mention, it's got a great lead vocal performance. Father John Misty with Mahashmashana. This just had an excellent dreamy vibe throughout the whole thing. It's got a lot of long-winded songs, which means I wasn't exactly putting a lot of this on my playlist, but overall, I did feel like the experience was done super well. At number 27, it's going to be easily one of my favorite hip-hop projects to come out of the last couple of years. Joey Valence and Brae with No Hands. Holy shit, these guys know how to have so much fun. I genuinely could not take off the stupid ass smirk I had on my face while I was listening to this. It is just such a fun take on that hardcore Beastie Boys style, and No Hands was an excellent follow-up to Punk Tactics. Right from the start, you can feel just how fun this thing is going to be, and it does not let down for the entirety of its runtime. There's so many great, memorable moments, flows, lyrics. I love that rap feels like it learned how to have fun this year, and just be simple and enjoyable. Not to say that rap can't be in-depth and interesting. I think it absolutely can and should continue to do that. But between this and GNX, I love albums that just feel like a party. Like a celebration of not only the sound, but just for the people making that sound.
The future is bright.
Well, this thing made me absolutely sob. Adrianne Lenker is one of those songwriters that never really fails to bring emotion out of me. And with Bright Future, that is absolutely the case yet again. Adrianne Lenker made one of my favorite singer-songwriter albums with songs back in 2020, and this was the best follow-up I think anyone could have asked for. The songs are so endearing, and there's, again, some real tearjerkers. Adrianne absolutely knows how to pour her heart out into these songs. The feelings are just all there, and yet it still manages to sound and feel excellent. Adrianne's vocal performance is amazing as always. The production and guitar work is stellar. Just an absolutely amazing folk album.
Downward Spiral.
And now we finally made it to the top 25. For these albums, I'm going to try and go more in depth. I can't really do it for all of them, but I'm going to do my best. We have Touche Amore with Spiral in a Straight Line. Honestly, this is just really well done emo. There's a lot of great sounds on here, but I feel like all of them are done with such a professionalism, if that makes any sense. It does have a little bit of an iffy start, but it gets into the groove so quickly, and I just felt like after every song, I couldn't help but be like, yeah, that was great. I love that. The vocal performance does do a lot of the grunt work here. It's just an excellent post-hardcore performance, even if it does sound a little bit like Gene from Bob's Burgers. Yeah, just been coming back to this one a ton.
Blood for the blood god.
At number 24, it's going to be this metal album that everyone would not shut the fuck up about, with Blood Incantation and their album Absolute Elsewhere. Yet again, giving us some absolutely stunning artwork, but also bringing us some absolutely awe-inspiring death metal with some space and progressive rock thrown in there, which you might think would be super jarring, going from these brutal death metal instrumentals to Pink Floyd style space rock, but the transitions are done so carefully that every single time it switches, it feels completely natural. And you kind of just go, well, yeah, of course that's what it did. It's fucking Blood Incantation. The homages to Pink Floyd style don't really feel like copycats, but instead feel like an elevation of that genre, a blending into the metal scene, if you will. And I think that is also carried by the fact that these performances are just spectacular. There's really not an instrument that isn't giving its absolute all here.
Gentlemen, suck my dick.
And with another metal album that I checked out this year, Thou with Umbilical. This is an absolutely brutal take on sludge metal. It's got this disgusting vocal performance, these thick, sludgy guitars, and I think that that is what engages me the entire runtime, was that sound just never wears off. It is consistently brutal the entire time. Just amazing riffs, performances, all around the board. Just excellent sludge metal. I'm so glad this got recommended to me. I've fallen in love with sludge metal a ton this year, and I really feel like the releases from this year in that sound have just been absolutely fantastic. And I think that Thou continues to be one of the leading bands in the genre right now.
You guys ready to go to this funeral?
Let's f***ing do this! Up next, it's going to be Destroy Boys with Funeral Soundtrack number 4. The hooks on this thing are just spectacular. There's this energy that drives the whole thing, but it's these vocal melodies and guitar hooks that just pull me in every single time. The songwriting is so strong. I've been having fun with so many of these tracks, re-listening to them again and again. They are absolutely big playlist occupiers for me at this moment. I really gotta dive further into Destroy Boys because clearly their offering in terms of the garage rock and post-punk-y scene is just absolutely epic and amazing.
Funny one?
You stupid! And next it's gonna be Aronsi Pazuzu, I'm so sorry, with... Man, I don't even feel like trying. With one of the most interesting approaches to metal that I've heard in a very long time. This thing is almost post-punk at times, with the kind of drumming that's going on and the style of riffs, which I think is just a super interesting blend that I haven't really seen a lot of. And in that blend, it creates a sound that is cold and calculated, yet loud and demonic at the same time. I feel like metal insists on being so over the top, but this felt so calibrated and so specific in its moments of ferociousness. Really interesting stuff. Definitely check this one out if you're into oddball metal.
Shapes and colors the likes of which I've never seen.
Down at number 20 we have Colin Stetson's The Love It Took to Leave You. Between Colin's last album, the Uzumaki soundtrack, and now this, I'm happy to say that Colin Stetson is now one of my favorite projects happening right now. The Love It Took to Leave You has one of the most unique sounds that I've heard all year, and I think that I can attribute that to the fact that this is a saxophonist using the saxophone as a texture, almost like a synth at points, which is something that occurred in the last album, but not to an atmospheric level quite as much as this. I feel like it induces such a deep existential dread in me with just musical passages, which is such an insane feat to accomplish. And not only that, but it feels the perfect length. Each song goes for as long as I feel like it needs to, just long enough for it to have the impact it's trying to have. Just excellent stuff here.
Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for!
I have been waiting for this Better Lovers album for quite a long time, and I am happy to say I am not disappointed. Better Lovers is essentially a supergroup consisting of former members of Every Time I Die and the legendary Dillinger Escape Plan. Now, the vocalist for the Dillinger Escape Plan, Greg Puciato, is one of my favorite metal vocalists ever. And I am happy to say he is at the top of his vocal game on Highly Irresponsible, the new album from Better Lovers. Last year they dropped an EP that I thought was amazing, and this somewhat surpasses that. I feel like it expands on the ideas that that EP presented, really highlighting the talents that Greg has as a vocalist, possibly through this more straightforward metalcore sound compared to what Greg did with the Dillinger Escape Plan. Occasionally it goes into these more complicated Dillinger-like passages, but overall I'm fine with the metalcore sound being very straightforward, because it's not like that all the time, and even when it is, it's still loud and chaotic and fun, and none of it really works to the album's detriment. In fact, it feels like all of the pieces here are just so well put together. There's a ton of songs with super memorable hooks and riffs and vocal moments. Absolutely top-notch stuff. Definitely one of my favorite metalcore acts to come out of the 2020s.
The diamond in the rough.
Cindy Lee's Diamond Jubilee has a unique sound, and I think that that's kind of understating it. I've never really heard an album that sounds like this. People have been talking about the fact that it sounds like it was recorded down a well, and I think that that is a perfect description. Everything just feels so dreamy. I've never seen an album that seems to capture what it would be like to remember a song that you haven't heard in a while, but it somehow catches that feeling perfectly. These melodies feel millions of years old, like they've existed before time. I owe that also to the vocals on this album, which are just heavenly to listen to. Every song feels unique. In fact, this feels more like an exhibit in a museum than anything else. It has so much to explore, and while that length does kind of hold it back for me a little bit, again, because it feels much more like an exhibition than an album, I take way more kindly to the overall length. This is definitely something you should check out. It's a fascinating project to go through. So here we are at the first Smile album of the year, Wall of Eyes. Before this, I had never really checked out the Smile, especially when it comes to bands like Radiohead. I don't really love checking out solo projects just because I feel like they can lack some of the streamlining and quality that comes with collaborative songwriting that the bands themselves have. But this really proves that you really cannot go wrong with Thom Yorke. Well, I meant musically, because I was really pleasantly surprised that I enjoyed this. It's got this really tasteful use of artsy songwriting that never really gets on my nerves like it does with other solo projects from similar level artists. Just a lot of great, subtle dynamics and an excellent vocal performance as always from Thom. You can't really go wrong with Thom's vocals, they're just iconic. It's got just such a serene atmosphere, excellent performances, and there's really just nothing else I would have wanted from this, and that's why it has gone down as one of my favorites of the year.
You must excuse me. I've grown quite weary.
Next, we are looking at Frail Body's Artificial Bouquet. This has a unique blend of hardcore, black gaze, and progressive metal that comes together into such a fantastic sound. This thing is absolutely brutal. What ties it all together is this screeching vocal performance that really never ceases to amaze me. It feels like a combination of all of the different vocal styles from each influence that Frail Body is taking from here. Not to mention, this album has probably one of my favorite guitar sounds in the metal releases I've seen this year. It's just got an undeniable sauce to it that I can't help but love. All the right elements are there, making for a grand, brutal project.
Banana.
So, like many other bands that I checked out, I had been meaning to check out Melt Banana for a long time, and I absolutely fell in love with them. They have such a chaotic and uncontained energy, especially in their vocals, that I just really haven't heard anything else do like them. And not only are the riffs and hooks here super diverse throughout the whole thing, but it still manages to keep that similar energy throughout the whole thing, being unrelenting and almost unfocused at times, but in a perfectly chaotic, unpredictable way. I was really pleasantly surprised by how this thing sounded, and it made me want to check out every other Melt Banana project I could get my hands on.
Now you must acquire a taste for jazz.
At number 14, we have this super colorful jazz fusion album from Kamasi, Washington that is Fearless Movement. Like I said, this is such a colorful blending of sounds, so many different stylistic choices brought together by stellar performances. There's so much power contained in every instrument, so much artistry and variety. The performances, of course, are top notch. There's really not much you can say. It's Kamasi, Washington. I mean, this stuff is always great. Now, I don't know much about jazz, but to see this level of talent and artistry get to such a place where it's reaching people like me, you know, meathead punks, it's just really nice to be able to be introduced to something like this.
Hey, Billy.
Coming closer to our top 10, it is Bill Ryder-Jones with this thing. This is indie rock and indie folk with such a perfect, inviting, lush atmosphere, these super poetic and tender lyrics, and a beautiful, subdued, and subtle vocal performance from Bill. This thing really just stuck with me because of its sound. It's such a pleasant and easy sound to get into. Just something that feels so warm and inviting from the very, very beginning. It feels like these little anecdotes that Bill leaves, while small and contained, feels so emotional and really give it a ton of character through that vocal performance. There's so much art and subtlety to that vocal performance. It really drives the whole thing for me. I don't know, I really felt great about this one, and that's why I think it's one of the best albums of the year.
Disco girl, coming through.
At number 12, it's going to be an album that absolutely stormed the underground pop world, Magdalena Bay's Imaginal Disc. Going into this, I wasn't really sure what to expect, and I ended that listen just absolutely grooving the hell out. This album has such a distinct, memorable sound to it. Each track flows into the other so perfectly. It's got stellar and super unique production, and a really fun central vocal performance. I really got behind the fun and upbeat songwriting. There's just so many moments where it just feels so fun to listen to. I've been really happy putting this on repeat all year. Definitely one of my most played albums.
Very cool.
And rounding out before the top 10 is Chat Pile's Cool World. I really remember enjoying the 2022 album, but I felt like this was an improvement on the ideas that presented. Not only does it have more memorable moments, but I feel like the ideas that the last album explored are developed even further here. And it's really brought Jetpile to the forefront of unique voices in sludge metal. They are easily the band that gets the most excitement whenever they come out with something new, and at this point I feel that is absolutely earned. Their take on sludge metal is so distinct, with it being so noisy and evil sounding and thick and muddy, and not necessarily in a super distorted way, but more in a very dissonant way, almost like a dissonant sludge metal sound, if that were to exist. These riffs are absolutely pummeling, and some of the most creative sludge metal guitar work I've heard. The vocal performance, of course, is great as usual, just excellent stuff.
You have entered the name Not Sure.
At number 10, it is going to be Jack White's No Name. First of all, this kind of odd album rollout where this was like a thing that you could buy at select record stores before it was released on streaming. So the first time I heard this was like a leak of the vinyl recording. There was a whole thing about sharing the record with 6 people. Anyway, the whole point is there was a lot of attention going on through anyone that was familiar with Jack White's stuff, just about this project being released in a very Jack White way, let's be honest. And I kind of put it on expecting it to be, you know, another one of the solo projects. Maybe some good riffs, probably some experimentation here and there, and I would give it a 7 out of 10 and move on. But no, this is easily Jack White's best project since anything he's done with the White Stripes. The consistency in the riffs, the vocal performance, the guitar work, my god, this is easily one of the best things the guy has done. I was so blown away by just everything this project had to offer. Its energy is so infectious and impossible to ignore. Just absolutely loved every second of this. Also, now that we're in the top 10, I want to talk about some individual tracks that really stuck out to me. And for this one, it was the track Tonight Was a Long Time Ago. It's got such a simple riff, but both the drumming and the sound and Jack's vocal melody work together so well in synchronicity to create one of my favorite tracks from any of Jack White's projects ever. It's an excellent song that I think really represents the energy and the creativity that is going on with this album.
He sounds like an angry Mickey Mouse.
At number 9, it's going to be the insanely loud Knocked Loose album, You Won't Go Before You're Supposed To. Now, of course, this was going to be on here because not only is the consistency and just general energy of the band top notch, but the production is absolutely stellar. This is probably one of the best sounding metalcore records that I've ever heard. Genuinely, this is like insane tier metal production. And it allows every single aspect of this album, especially the drums and the guitar, to just feel the most powerful that they could possibly be. The drums are slamming, that snare sound is just so fucking good. The guitars are loud but don't feel overblown. They just feel perfectly scratchy and massive. Vocals fit so comfortably in the mix. Just everything feels so large and so towering and so brutal, and all of it works together with Knocked Loose's incredible brand of hardcore songwriting. Now, the song that I want to talk about is probably the one that you expect I loved the most, and that, of course, is Suffocate. This is now my favorite Knocked Loose song, and it's barely even a competition because the songwriting on this one is just so strong. I can tell how much they loved that reggaeton breakdown because it just works so well, even when it's such a stupid idea. It's just one of those things that should not work at all, and yet in no way comes off tacky, and instead just feels like the most perfect thing the song could have done. Poppy's feature, of course, is super welcomed, and she does an excellent job meeting that chaotic energy that Knocked Loose's main vocalist brings to the table. Just loving the hell out of this thing.
What took you so long?
At number 8 is going to be Harriet with Devoured by the Mouth of Hell. I know there's a lot of metal on this list, but what can I say? Metal was just at the top of its game this year. So this is the band's debut after forming like a really long time ago, which is odd and sticks out to me. But anyway, with something that clearly the band has been working on for at least a while, you would expect that, you know, it sounds like it took that long to make. And I can say that, yes, it very much sounds like a band that has been perfecting every single song. I don't know if that's what took them so long or anything really. I don't know the history of the band that well, but point is, this album feels perfect. I honestly put it at the number 8 spot simply because I really can't think of anything that I would have wanted more from this for what it is. It's an absolutely crushing but also atmospheric metal album with outstanding production and vocal performances. I know that this is yet another album I'm going to describe as towering, but I really do feel like that's the perfect descriptor of this thing. It feels so massive, just larger than life. I don't know, the metal scene is eating pretty happy this year. My favorite song probably is Opaline. There's a bunch that I would have chosen, but this one just sticks out the most to me. I feel like it's the perfect combination of that atmosphere and that heaviness that this album exemplifies so well. This album has a lot of the traits that I feel like modern metal gets at, but really only scratches the surface of, and this feels like a much more in-depth take on that sound. The atmospheric, heavy, sludgy metal. Not sludge metal, but you know what I mean.
What if I really was someone else?
At number 7, the very long but very worth your time Spiral Staircase, The Perfect Child. This album, I gotta admit, kind of took something out of me. And I mean that in the best way possible. It is made to defeat you. Now, it took me a little bit to understand what these songs were about, but I got the gist of what was happening, and I began to just kind of break down internally. This, of course, is an album capturing the trans experience, and I feel like it embodies the isolation that can come through that experience in one of the most loud and crushing ways I could imagine. The way that noise is used on this album to represent the claustrophobia of a trans existence is so unique to this artist. The lyrics are extremely personal and very vivid, and personally, I think there is no song that represents that better than Uninhabitable Body. It is the album's second longest song, with Predators being the longest as it's the closer. And through that time, it brings you through this calm, relaxing atmosphere all the way to crushing noise with such a seamless build from one element to the next. It really feels so well done. And then it just explodes into this noisy post-punk inspired section, and finally finishes with that noisy beauty that I feel like the album also does so well. Just the sounds that go on in this album, I cannot get enough of. Luckily, there is so much this thing has to offer. Everything is really top-notch. This is just an excellent project.
Reach for the sky.
At number 6, it is going to be Paranol with Sky 100. Last year's release was pretty good. I still have to check out that live album. I hear it's amazing. But I can't remember anything really grabbing me. That was absolutely fixed with Sky 100. Sky 100 is easily one of the most memorable and captivating albums I have heard all year. I was blown away by the loudness of this album. In general, this thing is just so much, but in a perfect way. Even in the moments where it lets you breathe, it never really feels like it compromises on that loudness. That quality always stays with the album the entire time. And yet, it is such a perfectly constructed sound that I never really get tired of it. Then there is the masterpiece that is Evoke Me. I want to say probably my favorite song of the year. It just took me in so many different directions, and I loved each one. This thing is just absolutely perfect. I can't really think of what else I want to say about it. Just please, please go check this out. At number 5, I am putting Uniform's American Standard. I haven't really seen anyone talk about this, even though it's easily one of the most creative and interesting noise rock albums I've heard in a very, very long time. The first track is really an event. I've never really heard anything like it, and I feel like while it might come off boring, in the hands of Uniform, this thing is just pummeling and noisy and chaotic for the entirety of its length, and that is a feat that is pretty hard to accomplish. This is super unique sounding noise rock. By the way, that first track is easily my favorite, but again, it's not in my playlist because, you know, the thing is like 20 something minutes. And that being said, I do go back to this again and again because I cannot get enough of how this album sounds. It is just one of the most fascinating sounds I've heard noise rock pull off. Really just can't get enough of this.
I'll be right back with a hammock.
At number 4, it is the completely untalked about hammock. Look how long lasting everything is moving forward at once. Why is nobody talking about this thing? This album is pulling sounds from all over punk and using its incredible dynamics to deliver a brutal display of energy and hardcore punk chaos. Seriously, this thing will go from like post-punk to like grindcore basically with the drop of a hat. I really don't understand how this thing works at all. It should just be this chaotic, unbridled mess of noise, but I guess every song is taken with such a keen eye to what it's trying to do that they manage to avoid any clutter or undeveloped ideas. This is probably one of the albums I've come back to the most, simply because I just feel like it has so much to say, so much to offer. Probably my favorite song has got to be Trapdoor. From start to finish, this thing just has an impeccable energy to it. While it's probably not the best example of the dynamics and interesting ideas of this album, I feel like it is an idea that is done the best it can possibly be done. This thing evolves from hardcore punk noisiness to an almost somewhat ethereal continuation of itself. It feels like the ideas are reframed to fit a new context, which is so cool to me. Really, this thing is just using the best of what post-hardcore can accomplish. Please check this out.
Why is it all boys are idiots and so horny all of the time?
At number 3, it is going to be, of course, Jordy Griep with The New Sound. I don't really know what else we were expecting. All I can say is, rest in peace, Black Mini. You will be missed. Boy, this guy's pretty horny, but it sounds amazing. I don't know, this thing is just such a vibrant and unique collection of tracks that constantly engaged and surprised me. I especially loved Mr. Griep's vocal performance on here. Well, he certainly brings the chops to Black Midi. Here he just feels so unrestrained and loose on the tracks. His delivery is frequently very freeform, and it creates such a good character, and that's where the theater influence really seems to come in. It's so incredibly clear that there's a ton of theatrical, character-driven influence here, but it doesn't really ever feel campy, and I think that's because of the delicate balance between that theatrical chaos and the variety in styles and genre that this thing pulls together. The performances are just absolutely top-notch here again, and that is why Horny Black Midi makes it to number 3 for me. My favorite song on The New Sound, I mean, it's pretty close between The Magician and what I have to go with, which is Holy Holy. I know that's everyone's favorite, but come on, this song is so groovy, the character is fully there. Everything that this album has to offer, you can get in this song. Well, I mean, besides The Magician, but that song's like 8 minutes.
I want you to blow up the ocean!
At number 2, it is going to be Iglooghost with one of the best combinations of several electronic sounds this year, Tidal Memory XO. By the way, this cover goes insanely hard. I don't really know what's going on here, but like, hell fucking yeah, man. Like I said, this is an excellent blending of sounds. It brings together so many different electronic elements like breakbeats, deconstructed club, even drill. Yeah, there's like drill on this thing. It's got mind-blowing production that really just sucks me in every single time I listen. And I also owe that sucking in to the vibrant and exciting track list. Every song stands out to me. Really, there's nothing on this album that I would change at all. Every song brings everything it possibly can to the table. It feels like every single idea is explored and brought to its fullest potential. The vocals are cheeky but fun. I mean, yeah, there's not much else I can say. It's kind of hard to pick a favorite song on this album just because there are so many that I like. But if I had to go with one, I'd probably say New Species. It's been the one that I've returned to the most. And I think that's just because I'm in love with the synth sound on this, all the electronic elements, the DJing. It's just such a fun track. Please check this out. Now let's get on with some honorable mentions. These are just some albums that didn't make the list, but I feel like it's good to probably talk about. I did enjoy this one quite a bit, with a few songs being major standouts, and some of my favorites from the year, but I feel that the rest of the album simply didn't grab me as much as certain tracks. Still a really great release from Billie, and I can't wait to see what comes next from her. For me, this just took too long to get where it was going. Once it was there, it was a really, really good time, and it was super interesting. I can see that for a lot of people, this worked right from the start, and for me, it just took a while before I was sold on it. That being said, there are a ton of great tracks to enjoy here, and the sound is pretty unique. I found the vibe of this album to, of course, be excellent, but as with many trap albums, it's just a little too long for me, and so a lot of it ends up kind of fading into the background. It's still great to see putting together such a mature and magnum opus-like album. I really hope he continues this sound, although it feels like he might not. There is a lot going on here, and for me, it's just that not all of it works. There are excellent tracks for sure, but plenty of tracks just kind of go by, and a few of them outright do not work for me. Bring Me the Horizon continues to be one of the most interesting and inconsistent bands to follow. It feels like at this point, there is literally no telling what they'll do. But like the Bring Me the Horizon album, this one is doing a lot, and again, not all of it works for me. But I really don't feel like it has to. This album spoke to a lot of people, and that's awesome. And there were absolutely moments, like especially the song Next Semester, where things came together really well. Finally, there was that Mount Eerie album that I just ran out of time to get to before I finished the video. At the time of recording this, I haven't listened to it yet, but I know a lot of people really liked it, so I don't know, place it wherever you want on this list, I guess. And if there's any album that I still haven't mentioned that you want to see where I placed it, you can always go look on my album of the year, which I'll link in the description. It's where I review literally every album that I listen to, so if you're looking for my thoughts on something that you didn't see in this video, chances are it'll be there if I got to it. Alright, now time for the moment some of you have likely skipped towards. My top album of 2024.
One!
So, I had heard of, but never really checked out U-Boa before, but I cannot imagine something selling me on a project more than this. I realized I was trans about a year and a half ago, and of course, dysphoria has been a huge part of that experience. But it is extremely rare to see the exact feeling of dysphoria replicated in media. Not only is that experience extremely abstract, but it's rare, and a lot of the world doesn't really want to see it. Which is why I'm so glad movies like I Saw the TV Glow exist, and it's also why I'm glad that this exists. Impossible Light is dysphoria, but also the trans experience as a whole. Emptiness, the dissociation, the claustrophobia, these textures and drones and moments of crushing and brutal noise are so carefully calibrated to impart this experience onto the listener. It was really deeply emotional for me to hear this experience translated so well to an audio form. The finale, however, served as the most important part, the light at the end of the tunnel. This moment of inexplicable beauty, the euphoria. Anyway, enough of all of that. Point is, this thing is absolutely fantastic and fully sold me on the music of U-Boa. I will definitely be checking out other stuff from this artist. Anyway, that is my ranking of everything that came out in 2024. Yep, that was all of the albums. There was just 100 albums, and that was how that I felt about everything, all of the albums. If you saw something that interested you, just go check it out. Listening to new music as it comes out is one of the best ways to engage in music culture, and it's the best way to find new things that you'll love. I personally have found so many different bands and sounds just from checking out new stuff that's been coming out, and 2024 has been one of the best years to do that. There has, of course, been so much going on this year that I can't help but call 2024 one of my favorite years in music of the decade so far, which I know there's only been like 5 of those, but you know, like, whatever. And if you disagree with any of my placements, or you just want to highlight an album that you liked that was really good, let me know in the comments. I'm always happy to talk there because I love talking about music so much. I literally cannot be told to stop. Anyways, cheers to being halfway there. Let's see what the rest of the decade has to offer.